Welcome to the Playing Books podcast.
Great to be here.
Today we're doing a deep dive into a really impactful book, Adam Grant's Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know.
Yeah, this one really makes you, think again about how you think. It's not just theory. It explores why rethinking is almost like a superpower today.
Absolutely. And our mission really is to pull out those core ideas, the stuff you can actually use, almost like a shortcut to becoming a more flexible thinker.
And Grant kicks it off immediately with such a powerful story, doesn't he?
He really does, the Wagner Dodge one.
Exactly, the smoke jumper, facing that wildfire, Man Gulch, I think it was, and he does this completely counterintuitive thing.
Lighting another fire.
Right, an escape fire.
Yeah.
Saved his life when others who stuck to the standard procedure, well, they didn't make it. It just perfectly frames the whole book's idea.
It really does, that mental agility, that willingness to ditch the plan even when it feels crazy.
And Grant uses that to talk about something he sees in all of us, this tendency to seize and freeze.
Seize and freeze. Okay, what does he mean by that exactly?
Well, you know how we're pretty good at updating things. Our phones, computers, even our kitchen gadgets.
Sure, we want the latest update, the newest model.
Exactly. But Grant points out, when it comes to our knowledge, our opinions, our beliefs, we tend to grab onto them and just freeze. We resist updating them, even when, the facts change.
That rings true. It's like our mental software is harder to upgrade.
That's a great way to put it. And his solution, or maybe his suggested approach, is to adopt what he calls a scientist mindset.
Okay, a scientist mindset. Sounds intriguing. Not like a lab coat and goggles, I assume.
No, not necessarily. It's more about the approach. Instead of acting like a preacher who's convinced they're right and trying to convert everyone.
Or a prosecutor just focused on proving the other side wrong, finding flaws in their argument.
Yeah, or even a politician who's mainly trying to win over an audience, gain approval.
Right, so the scientist.
The scientist is different. They're actively open-minded. They actually look for reasons why they might be wrong. They see finding errors not as failure, but as, discovery. And they revise their views based on evidence.
So it's okay to be wrong. In fact, finding out you're wrong is good.
It's progress. It means you're learning. It requires a certain intellectual humility, being okay with doubt.
Okay, so it's not about lacking conviction then. Because sometimes you hear open-minded and think wishy-washy.
No, not at all. Grant actually talks about that later. It's more about detaching your ideas from your identity. Your beliefs are hypotheses to be tested, not, core parts of who you are.
That makes sense. And he uses some powerful examples, right? Like BlackBerry.
Oh yeah, the BlackBerry story is a classic cautionary tale in the book. They were pioneers, incredibly innovative.
They basically invented the smartphone category, didn't they?
Pretty much. But then they froze. They didn't rethink their core assumptions about keyboards, about what users would want next, even as the iPhone was, changing everything.
They were maybe too confident in their past success. Stuck in preacher mode, defending their existing model.
Could be. Grant suggests that sometimes being really smart, really successful, can actually make it harder to think again. You get good at arguing your own case, at rationalizing.
The curse of expertise, almost. You stop questioning because you think you already know.
Exactly. Which is why that active cultivation of the scientist mindset is so important for everyone, no matter how smart or experienced you think you are. You need that humility.
So thinking again isn't just about our own internal world, our own beliefs. Grant talks a lot about how it applies to how we interact with others, right?
Right.
Especially disagreements.
Yes, definitely. This is a huge part of the book. He suggests we should reframe how we even think about arguments. Less like a war or a battle to be won.
More like a dance. I think that's the analogy he uses.
Yeah, dance. Which sounds a bit maybe out there at first. But the idea is finding a rhythm, some common ground, focusing on understanding the other person's steps, their perspective, not just pushing yours.
Finding shared goals, maybe, instead of just points of conflict.
Precisely. And listening to understand, not just to reply. He even revisits one of his own famous ideas here.
Oh, right. The strong opinions weakly held thing. I remember hearing that phrase a lot.
Me too. And it's fascinating because he actually thinks again about his own concept.
He rethinks think again. That's very meta.
Kind of. He realized that sometimes stating opinions strongly, even if you internally hold them weakly, can shut down conversation. It can signal aggression or overconfidence rather than genuine openness.
Okay, so maybe it's better to communicate the The uncertainty or the openness more clearly.
Yeah, he suggests maybe leaning more into communicating with that intellectual humility we talked about, showing your thought process, maybe where you have doubts. It invites more curiosity, less defensiveness from the other side.
That changes how you might approach a debate or even just a discussion at work.
Totally. And that leads into another big area, creating environments where rethinking is actually encouraged, where it's the norm.
You mean like in teams or schools or companies?
Exactly. Workplaces, classrooms, even our own friend groups. How do you make it safe for people to question things, to admit they were wrong, or to, challenge the status quo?
That sounds like psychological safety.
That's the term, yeah. Psychological safety. Grant stresses how vital it is. Creating that space where people aren't afraid of being punished or humiliated for speaking up with a dissenting view or admitting a mistake.
Because without that, people just stay silent.
Right.
And you miss out on crucial information or different perspectives.
Absolutely. Problems don't get surfaced. Bad ideas don't get challenged. He mentions Ellen Ochoa at NASA post-Columbia disaster and how building that safety became critical for them to learn and prevent future tragedies.
And he also talks about having people around you who deliberately challenge you. What was that called?
Challenge networks. Yeah, the idea of intentionally building a group of trusted critics, people will push back, question your assumptions, point out your blind spots, but respectfully.
So not just yes men. You need people who will disagree with you constructively.
Exactly. People who care enough about you and your goals to tell you the uncomfortable truths sometimes. It's a crucial part of avoiding those echo chambers we can all fall into.
Okay, this is all making a lot of sense for how we think now and interact now. But what about the future? Does thinking again apply to, like, our life plans?
Oh, definitely. Grant challenges the whole idea of having rigid, long-term career plans. The old, where do you see yourself in 10 years question.
Right. He thinks that can be a trap.
Yeah, he talks about identity foreclosure, locking ourselves into a specific path or identity too early before we've really explored or allowed ourselves to evolve.
So if you decided at 18 you wanted to be a lawyer,
Mm.
you might stick with it even if years later it doesn't really fit who you've become.
That's the risk. Instead, he suggests focusing more on continuous learning and contribution. What actions can you take now that align with your values that help you learn and grow?
Less focus on the end goal, more on the process.
Kind of, and less focus on chasing some fixed definition of happiness. He points to research showing happiness often comes as a byproduct of engaging in meaningful activities and learning, not from pursuing it directly.
So maybe do career checkups instead of having a fixed 10-year plan, like regularly reassess, is this still meaningful? Am I still learning?
Precisely. Treat your career path more like a series of experiments and learning opportunities. It allows for more flexibility, more adaptation as you change and the world changes. It connects back to that scientist mindset again, doesn't it? Testing hypotheses about what you find engaging.
It really does. It ties it all together. And Grant fills the book with so many great stories and studies to back this all up. We mentioned Wagner Dodge and BlackBerry.
Yeah, and he touches on things like the Dunning-Kruger effect. How sometimes the less competent you are at something, the more confident you feel.
Oh, right. Because you don't know enough to know what you don't know, that lack of awareness.
Exactly. It highlights the danger of overconfidence and the need for that intellectual humility again.
And he talks about productive conflict too, doesn't he? Like the Wright brothers?
Yeah, apparently they argued constantly. But it was constructive. It helped them refine their ideas, challenge assumptions, and ultimately, achieve flight. It wasn't about winning the argument, but finding the best solution.
That's a great example of disagreement as a tool for progress. And you mentioned earlier, he gives tips for how to disagree measure.
He does. Things like finding that common ground first. And he mentions the steel man argument.
Steel man, not straw man.
Right, the opposite. Instead of misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack, straw man, you try to understand and state the strongest possible version of their viewpoint before you critique it.
Okay, that shows real respect and a genuine effort to understand. Takes effort, though.
It definitely does, but it makes the conversation much more productive. He also advises not overwhelming people with 10 different arguments at once. Focus on your strongest points and show a little vulnerability or humility yourself.
It all seems to circle back to that core idea, intellectual humility. Knowing that you don't have all the answers and that being wrong is actually an opportunity.
Exactly. It's not a weakness. It's the starting point for learning something new.
So for you listening, maybe take a moment to reflect on this, where in your own life, Maybe at work, maybe in your relationships, might you be doing a bit of that seizing and freezing?
Yeah, are there beliefs you hold on to tightly that maybe haven't been re-examined in a while? Could applying a bit of this scientist mindset open up new possibilities?
It's a challenge for sure. And to really get the full picture, all the stories, the research.
You really should pick up the book. Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know
Uh,
by Adam Grant. It's packed with so much more than we could cover.
Absolutely. And Grant's pretty active online, too. Engaging with him or others discussing the book on social media could be a great way to keep exploring these ideas.
Definitely. Let these concepts sort of percolate. See how they might actually enhance things for you, foster that cycle of learning and rethinking in your own life.
We'd really hope this deep dive into Think Again has given you some valuable things to chew on, maybe some practical tools for becoming more flexible in your thinking.
Yeah, Grant's work is such a necessary challenge, I think. Moving beyond just wanting to be right and embracing that agility you need in, well, this pretty complex world we're in.
We touched on a lot from Wagner Dodge's escape fire and the Man Gulch disaster to the pitfalls of overconfidence shown by Dunning-Kruger, the importance of detaching identity from ideas.
And the practical stuff, like rethinking disagreements, finding common ground, building those challenge networks, and even how we approach our future plans with things like career checkups.
It really is a rich book.
Yeah.
Consider building that challenge network. Who are those people who can respectfully push your thinking?
And maybe try out that career checkup idea. Take stock of where you are, what you're learning, what feels meaningful right now. It's a continuous process.
So as we said, this conversation is really just a starting point.
We definitely encourage you to grab Think Again and dive deeper yourself. Let these ideas work on you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Playing Books podcast for this deep dive. We hope it was thought-provoking.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
If you enjoyed this exploration, please do follow, subscribe, maybe share the podcast with others who you think might be curious about the power of books and rethinking.
Until next time.